I think you need to look for patterns. A lot of the data we look at for product marketing is also very qualitative from the sales side. Do they feel like they have the messaging they need for their conversations? Do they have the right slides for their pitch deck? So confidence level, so internal surveys and things like that. When I say positioning, I mean what's part of that, which is clarifying your ICP. Are we still targeting the right personas? It's not just to review the positioning document. It's looking back at our data. Are we targeting the right people? Have there been any big market shifts? Are there new competitors in the market now that we need to pay more attention to? You can't do, I believe, any positioning, messaging work, sales collateral, any of it until you have your narrative down.
Hey, welcome to the Message Market Fit podcast. I'm your host, Chris Silvestri, and if you're new here, this is a show where I chat with B2B SaaS folks in marketing, product, growth, and founders about how they join the conversation already happening in their customers' minds. We dive deep into their thinking, their systems, and their playbooks to see how they empathize with their audience and speak to them in a way that resonates, so they're compelled to take action. Join us and learn how you too can shape your messaging strategy and write copy that truly resonates and differentiates you. I'm super excited about my guest today, Shirin Shahin. Shirin is a product marketing consultant with over 10 years of experience helping organizations build and grow their product marketing foundations. In this episode, we chat about Shirin's approach to crafting compelling product narratives, her process for aligning cross-functional teams around positioning and messaging, the importance of being a chief storyteller for your product, and a lot more. Let's dive right in. Hey Shirin, thanks so much for being here. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good. Late part of the day, but still awake. Got some coffee in me, so all good.
Good. Glad to hear. You're ready to go.
Yes. So I wanted to start with kind of a big question. I always like big questions. What's the most exciting part of product marketing for you?
Oh, great question. The variety of the work. So there is so much that product marketers are asked to do. And sometimes we become hesitant with that. We say, oh, we're asked for so much. How do we prioritize? What do we do next? What do we do first? But I love that variety. I think it energizes us. Everything from whether it's creating a narrative for the first time for an organization or sales collateral for the 10th time for an organization. There's so much variety. And we work with not only a variety of the work, but we work with a variety of team members. So that really excites me. I don't think one day is the same. And especially now that I'm consulting, it's even more variety.
Yeah. Do you have an example of maybe one time that you realized this is why I do what I do?
Oh, great question. So I would say that example was more when I was in-house. So I worked at a couple different corporations, about 4 years each before I started consulting. And I think the most rewarding moments have been when I've brought together, and this was in person back then, brought together cross-functional team members, and we literally sat around a table talking about an upcoming product launch and getting everybody on the same page around this launch, talking about each of our team's goals. And I remember this was right when I entered product marketing was probably when I was like, oh, I really like this. There was a new product launch I was working on at Constant Contact. That's where I first started my product marketing career. And it was the first time they were stepping away from email marketing, which is their flagship product. So that was exciting in and of itself to be involved in that project. But I think what really excited me was for this new product for them, I was able to drive and bring together so many different cross-functional team members and just see these eye-opening moments of, wow, we're getting really close to launching this product. And look at all the pieces that we've all had to do to get here from across sales, CS, support, product, all of it. And I think that was so early in my career, but was really rewarding for me.
Yeah. What's your definition of product marketing? Because there's a lot of people have a lot of different opinions and it's not a very well-defined role, I think, yet.
Yes. So I believe the role of product marketing is to connect the market and the customer with your product. And there's many ways that we do that, not only just to connect it, but then once we're able to find that connection, how do we communicate around that to your audience. We are that middle person in that like broader sphere when you think about that, of really ensuring we're constantly hearing from the market, constantly hearing from our customers, monitoring our competitors, bringing all of that and saying, okay, this is the problem we're setting out to solve with our product. Let's make sure we're aligned. And I think product marketing does that to keep the glue between those two entities. And then now that we have that, how are we talking about it? That's the narrative work, positioning, sales enablement, messaging, all of that. But you're right. There's so many definitions. Even my definition, I think if you asked me a year ago, might have been different. So it evolves. But I think I used to answer it with, I do still say this sometimes, so I'll say my next version. My next version is we define the who, the what, and the why for your product. Sometimes I wonder if that's a little oversimplified. So that's why I didn't say it at first. But we do define the target audience, and that's everything from product market fit work, personas, all market and competitive comes into that because we need to do that in order to figure out your personas, all of that. What is about your product, getting really into the details of your product. And the why is why are you unique in the market? But we do more than that. So I started to say that a lot my first couple of years, especially consulting, and it resonated. People were like, okay, yeah, I get it. But I think we do so much that it's hard to summarize that into a couple sentences.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned that you like the variety. And a lot of people, especially consulting, jumping into big companies, might get overwhelmed by all the things that you have to work on. But you have a very well-oiled process. So to get into that, I wanted to ask, as a consultant, how do you make sure that you quickly get up to speed, onboard new clients, get everything that you need?
Yes. This phase, I think, is incredibly important. I call this my discovery and intake phase. Every client that I've worked with in the last 5 years, I take the first couple weeks to make sure that we not only do internal stakeholder meetings, but sometimes also external meetings with customers when I say external. So, and I'm very adamant about this. So I have come across prospects that when I put together a scope and it says 2 weeks of discovery, there are some that questioned it. And I've said, oh, so the first 2 weeks, you're like, what are we getting? What are you doing those first 2 weeks? And they're more curious. I'm not saying that they've doubted us or whatever, but it's a fair question. I said, look, if we don't do this discovery work and really understand your business, your product, your market, speak to your customers, we're not set up for success for the rest of the project. And once I explain that, the light bulbs go off and they understand that more. But it's so critical. I don't see how anybody would come to a new client or a new company and not take the time to do that. Yeah. So I'm just very clear about it. I add it into my scope. I outline what it means. I'll write in the details of what we're going to do. Sometimes, again, we speak to customers. Sometimes we don't, depending on the project and what we need to accomplish. More often than not, it's internal meetings. And one other thing I'll add is not only the internal meetings, but resources that are provided to us, lots of reading, digesting information, kind of anything that they have. We're just soaking it all in. There's those first couple weeks.
Yeah. You typically work with another product marketer, right? On
Yes.
projects? Why, I was curious, why is that? Do you have different roles, responsibilities? How does it work?
Yes. So this is a new model I started about a year ago for a couple different reasons. One is, of course, for my own business, I'm one person. So it allows me to scale and be able to work with more clients if I'm able to bring on another product marketer with me. I stay client facing. That's really important to me. So I still have a limit. I can't have 20 clients. So what I bring on another product marketer, it's not so much, it's a little bit of their skill. So I have 5 members on my team. They're all contractors and product marketing consultants. And each of them have sometimes their own unique strengths. I have one who's amazing at content as it relates to product marketing. A couple of them are really great at positioning and messaging work. And one I have that's for pricing and packaging, and that's not my strength. So I think it expands my kind of skills and ability to work with more clients is one reason. The other is just scaling my own business so I can interface with more clients. The third reason I did this, and honestly, I think this is my most important reason, the one I care about the most, is it's helped me stay much more engaged in my own work because I have a thought partner now. I'm collaborating with someone, and it can get pretty isolating when you're consulting. I don't know if you've had a similar experience, but Like when we're working with clients, yes, we're interfacing and meeting with them, et cetera, but you don't really have that team feel that we used to have. And so I started to really miss that. And so now I'm able to speak to my product marketer a couple times a week about a project, and we collaborate and brainstorm together. So I don't know if it's been similar for you. That's really helped me.
Totally, yeah. I'm actually in the process of hiring a junior copywriter and assistant
Oh,
researchers,
awesome.
for basically for the same reasons. But yeah,
Yes.
I were to ask, why don't you use ChatGPT as your thought partner?
Oh, yeah.
Just
Yeah. They're just, well, I do use ChatGPT for some things for sure, but
yeah,
they are just not the same as a
yeah.
human
It's
person.
still lonely.
So still lonely. Yeah. They don't help me with
Yeah,
my loneliness.
yeah. I'm curious. You mentioned that some clients see the two discovery weeks like in a wrong way. Do you see patterns, as in the types of companies that don't understand that at first, or is it a certain type of companies?
I wouldn't say certain type. I think most clients, and I think, or I assume majority of consultants would agree, everybody just wants to get things done faster. Oh, I wanted this done yesterday. This is going to
Yeah,
take a couple weeks just to get onboarded. Another pushback I have to that is if you hired somebody full time, they'd probably be onboarding even longer, because
yeah.
when you have a full time employee, they need to learn even more about the business that I don't need to learn. I just need to learn what's most relevant for my project. So that's another kind of how I go back on that with them. But it's a good question. I haven't noticed a pattern. It's just this desire to move so quick. And speed is not always the answer. You want quality, of course, over speed.
Yeah, yeah. So in this discovery phase, how do you deliver value as fast as possible for them to realize, okay, like this is actually useful. This is,
Yeah.
as you said, like eye opening.
Yeah, I usually try to make sure it's only about a couple weeks. You don't want to do this too long because then you're not really delivering anything. You want some quick wins. We also always share as we go any findings that we're discovering that might not even be related to the project. But for example, with a current client I have now, we did some conversations with a few sales members to prepare ourselves for updating a sales deck for them. And I actually ended up just sharing the notes with the CMO and somebody else that they actually have on their product marketing team now that they recently hired, saying, hey, this is part of the work here, but this information might just be helpful for you. So sharing that, even in the discovery phase, I think is really valuable for them. And of course, at the end of the discovery, we do a wrap up of all of our findings and summarize everything for them. And it's really insightful, I think, for them because we're pretty much an outsider that's coming in and asking some different questions. So they're able to have our view of what did we learn and was there any surprises, anything we didn't expect. That's valuable for them. So there is value. I just think they don't always see it right up front.
Yeah. So for any of your clients, what potential clients, what kind of questions should they expect from a product marketer to help them with product marketing? What are some of your favorite questions that you ask?
Favorite question. So what are we solving and for who? And those need to go together. So we might think we're solving a problem, but is that problem really something that the target persona you're going after really needs? Is it enough of a pain point for them? That's really important. I like to always ask, especially in the beginning before I engage with a client, what's the current challenges you're experiencing that's even triggered you to think about product marketing? The reason I ask that is sometimes it's not a product marketing problem. And maybe it's a marketing problem, a lead gen problem, a sales funnel problem. But we think it may be product marketing. And sometimes it is product marketing. We say, hey, we have so many new products right now. We know our positioning is not up to date. Sales is not equipped with the right information. So that's a question I ask to try to narrow in on what's the problem that they're experiencing. I also really like to ask about alignment in the teams. So tell me a little bit about how sales and marketing work together. What are the systems in place? Any frameworks in place? And I like to ask marketing and product, just blanked for the marketing and product, because that's also really important as far as how are we getting information right now from the product team. If there's no product marketing organization, what's in place already? These are the three teams that we work so closely with. Yeah. So marketing, product, and sales. So I like to get into that a little bit, and it helps give me more information as I think about a proposal or what type of work we will be doing.
What are some of the top challenges that you see in these internal dynamics between these three teams?
Yes, so more often than not, I don't see a lot of alignment or systems in place between the product team and the marketing teams. I'm shocked actually usually that how are they even getting their information? Like how are they learning about new products and features if they're not even have these systems in place? So that's one. And I would say sales and marketing alignment as well is not super common to see feedback loops in place. Or do they have any ways of learning back from the sales team who's speaking so regularly with the prospect, for example? So feedback loops, ongoing meetings of connection and communication. I also see pretty big gaps. I think what else? Probably also tracking. This goes to feedback, I would say, but probably also like when we have a product launch or something new that's launched, how are we tracking the success? I think that's another, or messaging. This might be more relevant for your world too, but how are we tracking if messaging is resonating and working? What's our process for that? There's often gaps here. And that's not always what I focus on, but I have focused on those. But I see these even while I'm engaging with clients in the middle of an engagement. Sometimes I'll see these.
Yeah. Who do you think it's responsible for tracking, for example, messaging performance?
I would say it's a combination of product marketing and the marketing team. And I always distinguish the two teams. Marketing is going to be most aligned with what campaigns are they sending out? Who are they targeting? What are the different channels that they're going out with and the right tracking mechanisms. But I think product marketing needs to work closely with them so that based on what they're finding from their learnings, we need to help them in adjusting that messaging. But I haven't actually seen product marketing solely being responsible for helping to track messaging success. I don't know how if you've seen differently in your world of who typically tracks that, but
yeah, typically I work directly with either product marketing, sometimes even, or the CMO in smaller companies.
Yeah, and it actually probably also depends. Sometimes we work on in-product messaging. So if the messaging is in product, I would need to work with the product team to get those metrics and track that. And then I would actually say product marketing is leading a little bit more. But if it's messaging in a webinar or a campaign that's going out, an email campaign or whatever, social media, anything like that, I would say the marketing team is more responsible.
And the types of clients you work with, do they typically don't have a specific role for product marketing in-house?
They typically have not, and that's why they're usually at the stage that they haven't hired for product marketing yet. Sometimes they have one product marketer, but that product marketer is pretty junior level, so they're actually looking for someone to come in and even help mentoring or coach them, which I love doing as well as part of the work. And another kind of use case of when I'm brought in is they had a product marketing lead or someone in place, but they left for whatever reason. So there's a gap that they need to fill until somebody else is hired. So I would say that's the third use case of when we're brought in.
So for you as someone who's not in-house and has to step in, especially filling this role, what's the hardest part of working on positioning and messaging?
Getting alignment from internal teams. So, and not even teams, I would say leaders. So the product leader, sales leader, the marketing leader, making sure we're all on the same page. A big part of the exercise of doing narrative work or positioning work is actually getting people all to agree on who are we, what problem are we really trying to solve, how are we solving that problem, and I've had a couple clients where they've disagreed. But that's also okay. That's part of the exercise. And if we're able to help them in this process, what a great win that they come out of it aligned. But I think the hardest part for us is getting alignment on that.
Yeah. And when it comes to alignment, there's one part I think that for us is that I saw you mention somewhere where you say that during a project, it's also important for you to be to keep in the loop about what's happening outside of the project. So if any sales motions are... So how do you make sure that you get the inputs?
Yes. So I always do a one-on-one with my main point of contact with the client. And that's not even with my other product marketer. Sometimes it is. It's just one-on-one with me. And what the first question I always ask in that meeting is, are there any other broader company updates that are happening currently that could potentially affect our work that I should be aware of? So that pushes them a little bit to think about anything else that might be going on. Was it a board meeting and there was some big update? Are there changes in the product organization that we need to know about? I think if you don't ask, they would easily forget, I think, to tell you, or that's my impression. So it's always actually the first question that I bring up.
Yeah, because it's not their responsibility if you think about it to keep you informed. So
No, and they care mostly about the project, and I
Yeah.
get that. So they care about the outputs of the project. But I think where they maybe don't put all the connections is that things that are going on at the organization will impact this project. So not all of them, but if there's anything relevant, and usually they always have something to update us on. So it's good.
You call yourself chief storyteller of your product, which I love. How do you think about crafting product, narrative, storytelling?
Yes. Yeah, I think it's so important. So I call that, I think, for product marketers, you need to be a chief storyteller of your product. So I believe any positioning, messaging work, sales collateral, any of it until you have your narrative down. So one of the first things I do, even if a client comes to me and says we need positioning, I say, okay, that's great. We're actually going to start with a narrative. And that's just a Google Doc. It's internal. We're writing your story. Market trends that are happening, what's happening in the world, how is that impacting your business? How is that impacting your audience? We're not even talking about your business yet. And then because of that, what are the new pain points that are coming across? How do you solve those pain points? So we go from macro to micro in this story. And I just think it's so critical. And I know there's people out there that focus specifically on narratives and storytelling, which is amazing. But I think it's a very key part of product marketing, because that ultimately, I believe, sets the foundation for all the work that's after. And each of these steps, you want to get alignment. So even when we work on the narrative, I want to make sure everybody's aligned on that, so that, okay, now that we have that and we all agreed, remember when we all agreed over here? Now we're going to work on positioning and messaging and so forth.
Yeah. Can you define for the audience, maybe the aware, how do you define narrative, positioning, messaging?
Yes. So narrative, I say, is your story around your business, all the way from macro market trends to your product. Positioning, I would say, gets into more of that who, the what, and the why. And it's very clearly documented in this. The personas you're going after, the pain points you're solving for, why you're unique. So your unique differentiators are in this document. I like to call those value pillars. So those are in the document, as well as outcome pillars, the ROI. So what? So what for this work? So that's the positioning. And then messaging, we take all of that and we get to closer to customer-facing language. This is going to be leveraged the most probably for the go-to-market motions that are happening. But without the narrative and the positioning, I don't feel we can get to messaging very confidently.
Where do you see companies have the biggest gaps? Is it more in the positioning,
narrative and positioning? I feel like they often jump to we need messaging, because what they think about is I need to update my website. My sales deck is out of date. And they think, okay, we need new messaging, but how do you get that messaging if you don't work on your positioning? Or if you've worked on your positioning, it might be a year or two old. We need to revisit it. So I don't always mean you need to start from scratch, but very often they'll skip over, I think, the narrative and positioning work. And it's incredibly crucial to start there at the base. But again, it might not be from scratch. It might be we're just coming in and auditing to begin with, reviewing what you have, meeting with a few key stakeholders to make sure what you have is what you want to go forward with and everybody's aligned to that. But yeah, I think that's a pretty big miss, because it's not output exactly that's customer facing. And people tend to say, oh, but no one's going to see this. Why are we doing this work?
Yeah. All right. So after this discovery phase, what does the rest of your process look like?
So it all really depends on the project, of course. I would say 80% of my work, 70 to 80, falls under the positioning and messaging bucket, but I also focus on sales enablement. I focus on product launches. So if there's no system or framework in place for a product launch, I love coming in and help establish that. So the rest of the scope is very clearly defined. I usually go month by month, if not even sometimes a couple of weeks at a time. And I'll outline, it really depends on the initiative, but I'll outline what's the goal of this phase, what are key deliverables that will be expected, and what's the approximate timeline. And I find that prospects really appreciate having some sort of timeline expectation, so they ultimately know when they'll receive something. So It really depends on the type of project.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have any specific go-to frameworks that you always find yourself using the most frequently?
I have templates. There's so many templates out there. You've probably seen that too. But I have my own templates for a narrative, a positioning doc, and a messaging doc. They're each 3 distinct documents. There's no one size fits all. When I work with my product marketers, my contractors, they'll often bring a template that they've used or they've learned from somebody else. What's really great is I feel like the product marketing community is so giving. So we often share templates and just say, hey, I use this one. Oh, I use this one. Let's combine them. I like that you have this section and I don't have that section. So it's very fluid. And then I have a very specific product launch dashboard I like to use. I actually still use a spreadsheet to track launches. At a high level, when it's like very task to-dos, we'll go on a project management tool. But yeah, those are some of my key frameworks. I will say for narrative work, I like using Andy Raskin's framework. So that's not my framework for his format of strategic narratives I really like.
Yeah. What do you think about one-pagers? Like, for example, for positioning, do you use a type of positioning canvas? And do you see one-pagers being actually helpful for teams?
Yes, I think one pager is a great place to end up. My positioning documents don't start at one page. They're often 7 or 8 pages. I'm comfortable with that. The clients have been comfortable with that to start. But then I love being able to take that and say, let's summarize this into one page, because likely sales is not going to use an 8-page document. But I enjoy having both because the 8 or 9-page document goes into so much more detail. And sometimes I find sometimes you need that detail. Like you want to have a reference point just in case you need it. So, yeah, I don't start with one page because I wonder if you start with one page, you could limit yourself almost too much and not capture the most essential information.
Yeah, the one-pager should be a distillation of all the work that you've done.
Exactly. I would say the same for messaging. I don't think I've actually distilled. Like you could do elevator pitch, value prop, taglines, and some company descriptions in a one page. But beyond that, there's no room on the one page. So I work on supporting messages for all the value pillars. All the outcome pillars have their own messaging. It's not going to fit on one page.
Do you also present different messaging for different channels as well?
I do not. So I like to then work with a content or copywriter person to say, hey, here's our foundation. Depending on where this is going, they usually take that and they edit it and customize it a little bit depending on the channel. But I think that's their expert. To be honest, I don't think that's the product marketer's expertise. I think that's either a messaging expert like yourself or a content person. I think it's their expertise to say, hey, we have this. Now, how do we use this on the website versus sales deck versus ads?
All right. So I was curious about how you manage review cycles within the teams that you work.
Yeah, so that's really important. One of the biggest things I ask early in an engagement with a new client is, who is our review team? And I like to ask that up front. And we don't want 10 people. And I'll always say that. I'm not shy to say that. Who are the 2 to 3 people that need to sign off on this? Ideally, 1 signing off, but you have a few people reviewing. And I get their names right up front. And in fact, they're not only leveraged for the actual review, but I like to try to keep this group involved through the process. So, because I like to have a very collaborative approach, that's one of my important values for my business, is you're not going to wait a month, then see the output. You're actually going to see it probably a few times that month when it's in draft mode, because we want your input. So that's why very early I ask, who's responsible for sign off? Who's the best team for reviewing this? That review team might be different for a sales deck versus a positioning document. It doesn't mean we can't be flexible if somebody else wants to review as we go. Of course, we can be flexible. But I'm just very clear that with my main point of contact, that's their job, is to help us figure out who are the right people that need to review a certain piece.
How many people is too many to review, for example, messaging?
I would say more than 3 or 4 is too many. I think then you just get different opinions and you have to come back to a room, like you don't get anywhere. So
yeah, I was about to ask, what are the pitfalls of having too many
yeah,
people?
I think you don't get anywhere. You can spin, especially with messaging. People take messaging so to heart, and I get that. We can't use this word. We have to use this word. It's how about we start testing? How about we don't stress too much about exact words? But I think the pitfall is you just spin. It could drag on for weeks to just review messaging. So that's maybe for you too, but we just need to be very actively involved to encourage and coach that even if we are at a good enough and we're not at perfect, let's take good enough and let's go test it and do an A/B test, for example. Let's leverage it on the sales team and see what their input is. Because too many people, and then you start some people like grouping together against another two people, and it can get very messy, and that you don't want that. So 3 or 4 is ideal.
Yeah, I liked also April Danford. I think she says that when you create, like, for example, a sales pitch deck, give it first to the kind of the top sales person and let them sell it to the other sales.
I love that idea. Yes, I love that idea. Who are your influential team members on the team that will help you roll this out is a very smart way to go. I actually don't advocate as a consultant for me to do sales training. I don't think I'm the best person to do the sales training. They don't even know me on the sales team, most likely. But what I have done with clients is work with one of their lead sales team members saying, hey, I'm going to train you and share these documents with you. But what's the best process for your team? How can you roll this out? And there's more respect there. There's more buy-in when it's coming internally. I really love that idea. Yes.
Yeah. So when it comes to, you have this messaging document, how do you make sure that the product, sales, marketing teams actually use it cohesively?
Yes. So one is, I always often ask, where are we hosting this document? Where is it? Is it going to be easily accessible? I think that's really important. 2 is, how are we rolling it out? And I'm not always involved in the rollout process, but just making sure there is some sort of plan for how they're planning to roll this out, I think is really important. Is it going to be an all hands? Is it going to be a video that's sent out with a Q&A session? But to be honest, ultimately, I'm usually off the project by the time that it starts to get rolled out. It's not typically part of my project scope, or it can be, but it hasn't been in the past really. So I would love actually to know the answer with some of my past clients. I'm really hopeful that they've been using it, but I haven't actually been involved with a lot of those.
So this is a bit nerdy as well. You and I, in our profession, we get into a lot of data. How do you manage and make sense of all that data? Like, for example, first you have to decide what data you need, then how to monitor, for example, competitors, market shift. How do you make sense of all of it?
Yes. So one, I really like to work with somebody internally that's going to be helpful for me to get the data, because I think it's hard as a consultant to get the data. So who's the person that maybe knows Salesforce the best? Who's the person that is looking at the website metrics, for example? And you know what? I don't think I have the best process for how I organize all this data besides just organizing in our folders, using discovery and intake as a big part of digesting that data, actually. So we ask for that data pretty much upfront in those first couple of weeks and put that into our synthesis of what we've learned. But I actually don't think, and this is a good learning for me, I do an amazing job staying on top of the data as we go. And I love to hear if you have strategies you've heard from others, because I think with let's say an average project is 3 months. There's a certain point that you need the data, but there's a certain point you need to execute on the work. And data can continue to shift, but then you're just chasing a moving target, if that makes sense. So at some point, I think it's important for us to say, hey, this is the data that we had in the patterns that we see, but I'm done with the data synthesis phase, and now I need to work on execution, because I can't stay on top of it. Like, I don't think I can. I don't know if you have, but I don't think I can stay on top of it very successfully.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about it like exactly today. I was basically going some review mining through a document, like 29,000 words of reviews. And after a while, you start seeing patterns. So that's when it's like you get a sense, okay, I'm like, this is enough. I need to implement. And put it
and actually, maybe that's where AI tools can probably help. I don't know which ones, to be honest with you. I can't keep up with everything that's happening with AI, but I'm sure there's ones you could probably throw in some of your data and it comes back. Hopefully comes back with some of the patterns that it's seeing. So I could see that being a really good use case for AI, actually.
Yeah, what I found is AI is great to spot patterns and give you maybe trends, some of the themes. One thing that still doesn't do well, it's extracting voice of customer, sticky language, sticky messaging. For that, I think you still need to go through all the reviews, absorb all the language and kind of
the tone.
for yourself.
Yes, like we listen to gong calls in our discovery phase, any sales recordings. You're right. You you miss the nuances. And actually, I've even used some of these note taker tools, and they don't, I hate to say, they don't capture everything. I think my notes are better because I'm writing all the details when I'm on a call, and it'll miss sometimes really specific moments and words that were used on a call. So there might be better ones out there now, but this was a couple months ago that I was like, didn't really capture everything.
Yeah, I'm curious, how are you able to like still be present on a call and also take notes? Because that's something that I
Oh,
always find
it
hard.
actually helps me stay present on a call when I take notes because I'm
Ah,
super attentive if I have to write while I'm listening.
okay. Yeah,
For
so
me, like I can't get distracted. I think there's so many distractions on our computer, but for me, I'm listening and note taking. But yes, I usually have some of my questions already ready, so I'm pretty much ready to go. This is also what's really helpful with having a partner, like a contractor with you. So we'll both be on the call. So if one of us misses something, like usually one leads the call, one takes the notes, and that works really well.
yeah, true. All right. So when it comes to getting data back, so for example, performance data, conversions or improvements, how do you go about applying that data, for example, in sales collateral or your messaging documents? Because
Yeah.
maybe there's the temptation to, you see some data, oh, let's change something like right away. How do you make sure that those changes are actually impactful and meaningful changes?
So one, I wouldn't react to data too quickly. I think often we can get reactive and one piece of data all of a sudden shows us something's not working and we go and change everything. It's not the case. I think you need to look for patterns. A lot of the data we look at for product marketing is also very qualitative from the sales side. Do they feel like they have the messaging they need for their conversations? Do they have the right slides for their pitch deck? So confidence level, so internal surveys and things like that. So I think setting the right expectations with the client as far as what data you're going to look for and how often you're going to act on that data is important. So they don't think every week we're looking at data and acting on it. I think that's too much personally. All depends on your role, of course. But for our role, I think that's too soon to know if positioning is landing in the market. We probably need a quarter or a couple quarters to see if positioning is working. Is it impacting conversion? Are website metrics changing? All of that. So it's a timing thing, setting the right expectations and the right mechanism for receiving that data.
Speaking of changes, what do you tell clients who ask you how often they should revisit their positioning?
Yes, I think revisiting your positioning a couple times a year. So I would say every 6 months or so. And when I say positioning, I mean what's part of that, which is clarifying your ICP. Are we still targeting the right personas? It's not just the review the positioning document. It's looking back at our data. Are we targeting the right people? Have there been any big market shifts? Are there new competitors in the market now that we need to pay more attention to? So positioning is the one word for many things that I think need to be looked at. I would say every 6 months or so.
Yeah.
Because too much sooner than that, there might not be enough time, enough data to make changes. And then much later than that, you could miss something.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, when it comes to research and collecting the data, a lot of companies that I see don't really have like processes and systems in place to regularly, consistently collect data and
Yeah.
feedback. Do you help them install some kind of system or process?
Some of that. Ours are more qualitative to the sales is very Salesforce oriented or whatever platform they're using. Messaging and marketing is usually more on the marketing team. Even when I was in-house, I don't feel it could have changed for those that are in-house. I didn't play a huge role in data, like systems for gathering data. We were more receiving the data. And it's the same for me right now in my role too. I would say in consulting, I don't really go in and do that. Or it's not something I offer in my services,
Yeah,
I
it's
guess.
more of an ad hoc. You come in, you collect the data you need, and use it.
Yes. And I usually try to collect that data early on in the engagement. Of course, if as you go, you need a specific metric or, hey, we're going to start working on the website. Can we get some Google Analytics on what's going on the website? Then I'll ask that at that phase, of course. Yeah.
Where do you go to learn, Shirin?
So I have two areas of learning. One is product marketing and one is running a business. So there's some podcasts I listen to, and I have to think if the names come to my mind right now, but for independent consultants, running a business, the financials of all of that, processes for running a business. So that's one avenue. For product marketing, everyone knows Product Marketing Alliance. I love that. I like ShareBird. They do a lot of sessions and a lot of learning conferences. Most of the conferences I've been to, though, are product marketing related. What I need to be better at, and I know this, especially for next year, to make it a goal to be at conferences that are not necessarily product marketing related. They're actually more marketing and broader because we work with those teams so much that I know I need to do a better job of learning in that space because I can tend to stay into my product marketing bubble, maybe a little too much. So yeah, those are the ones that come to mind. So probably a mix of podcasts, events, articles that like Sharebird posts and things like that, forums, Slack communities. Those things, I can't keep up with them. So there's too many.
Swamped.
Yeah, you're getting swamped. There's just so much information. LinkedIn is a great learning source, but I also can't keep up half the time with LinkedIn. I think you need an hour a day just to sit and read. And I don't always have that. That's probably same for you. It's hard to even find that time. Yeah.
All right. My last question is, what is it like to attend a dinner with 5 strangers?
Oh, I love this. Wow, you did your research. So it's an organization called Time Left, and it actually started in Europe. I think it started in France, and they do a dinner every Wednesday at different restaurants. Now they're in Boston as well, which is where I am. And it's interesting. It's a nice change from going to work events because this is a personal dinner. You're going to dinner, you sit with 5, sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 4, but let's say average 5 people. They try to match you up based on age, industries, and interests a little bit. But you get a broad range, mix of male, female, all of it. And I enjoy it. I don't do it every week. I probably do it once a month. But I met a girl that I ended up traveling to Portugal with because of this dinner. I met her like 3 months before that, and we became friends. And then we traveled to Portugal together because we both wanted to travel, and we didn't have many people to travel with at the time. So we said, let's do it. So you never know. But I know some people are terrified by the idea of sitting at dinner with 5 strangers. So it depends on your preferences.
What's the conversation start? Hey, what do you do? like at a
or just what brought you here? Is this your first dinner? How did you learn about it? But then there's an app for the event, so there's also some icebreaker questions if you want to use it. So one of the dinners I went to, we actually ended up using all the questions, which was fun though.
Nice. All right, Shirin, thank you so much. This has been super helpful. Where can people find you? LinkedIn, your website, iamshirinshahin.com.
Yes. Yeah, my website's great. iamshirinshahin.com, and LinkedIn is probably the best place to reach me.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the pod. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, the best thing you could do to support the show and help me as a small business owner would be to leave a review. Head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and let me know what you think. If you don't want to miss future episodes, subscribe, and if you have any feedback, questions, or suggestions for future episodes, just hit me up on LinkedIn at Christopher Silvestri or Twitter at SilvestriChris. Speak to you next time.